LSUS. She's an entomologist. And those of you who listen to Red River Radio know that she does a show about bugs. And I had the pleasure of meeting her when both of us were asked to be on the Health Matters show talking about mosquito-borne diseases. And I learned so much from her just listening, sitting next to her, that I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us to learn about the bugs that she knows about and bring us the bugs that we take care of. So I thought that this would be a very interesting talk, and I think she's a great lecturer. How many of you have been out to graduates of LSUS who took the lecture with her? So she knows a lot of you. You know her, and I think that would be a great opportunity for us to get to know her even better. So that's perfect. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Why don't you take over?
All right. Here's your copy.
Okay, thank you.
Entomology is a strange field, and most people, when they think about entomology, they think about people wandering through the meadow catching beautiful butterflies, and that's not the kind of entomologist I am. I became interested in entomology because I like to figure out how to kill those bastards.
They transmit diseases, and they eat our crops and our food and everything. And I enjoy the aesthetics part of entomology, but the part that I really enjoy is just learning their ecology and their behavior. And they asked me to put in a disclosure sign. I'm just an independent scholar. I don't work for anybody. And I just want to come here today and just share a little bit of what I know compared to, the arthropod vector kind of a world. So, in order to understand insects, you have to understand their life cycles. And there's two basic life cycles. Here you have lice and the egg, and you can see that the immatures look very much like the adults. But over here, this is called a gradual life cycle. Over here we have a holometabolic life cycle where you have the egg, and the immatures normally are these little grub-like things. These are fleas. And then they have the pupal stage, and then you have the adult. And the wonderful thing about having a lifestyle or a life cycle like this is because the immatures do not compete with the adults for survival. The immatures feed on detritus and other organic matter, where the adults are blood feeders. And this ensures their survival through the less competition. I'm going to hit on the big four today: mosquitoes, ticks, fleas, and lice. And I want to start off with the mosquitoes. And mosquitoes, their immatures are maggots, and this is a non-mosquito maggot. But I want to show this slide to show that the immatures are very different from the adults. This is like a flesh fly maggot. And a lot of people, when they see the maggot, they think, oh, well, this must be the head, because we have two little eyes or something here, and it tapers down to the tail. And it's just the opposite. This is the head, and this is the tail. And you can see these scleroterized mandibles. These maggots always feed on wet, decaying organic matter. And these two little dots back here are actually the maggot's nostrils. They're called spiracles, and that's what they feed through. And I can't think of a better design for a maggot, because if you are head down into decaying wet organic material, feeding, you don't have to come up for air. You just breathe through your butt. Yeah, it's great. And one of the ways that we identify maggots is through the morphology of these spiracles. And here's some: Caliphora, Calotropia, Foremia. This spherical design right here is the genus Foremia, and this is the actual genus that we use in maggot therapy. I assume that most of you understand maggot therapy. But identification of maggots versus identification of mosquitoes. Now, the mosquito mouthparts are actually quite complicated to be such a little guy. And you all know that it's only the female mosquito that takes the blood down. The male mosquito only feeds on nectar. The female mosquito will feed on nectar, but in order to produce a clutch egg, she must have protein in her blood mail. And if you look at a cross section of a female mosquito's mouth parts, you have this opening, this is the food canal, and you have a little bitty dot opening right there, that's the salivary canal. So when a female mosquito is feeding on you, it's like she's injecting two hypodermic needles. With one, she's sucking up the blood. With the other one, she's injecting her saliva, and in that saliva might be viruses, might be bacteria, might be protozoans, whatever the mosquito is transmitting. And so that makes the mosquito almost a perfect vector of infectious diseases. One of the things that I really like to have as a take-home message is that there are several species of mosquitoes, but only a few of them can actually transmit diseases. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But here in the Arthropod area, there's over 68 different species of mosquitoes. Not all of them have the ability to transmit diseases. And of the 68 species, there's only 3 genera. We say genera because we can't say genuses. That would be incorrect. You have Ades, and these are normally associated with the yellow fever. I hope most of you. Oh, that's a typo. It's not chip. I have it corrected in some other slides. You have Anopheles, which are associated with malaria, and then the Culex genus that's normally associated with West Nile and other forms of encephalitis. A female mosquito, when she lays a clutch of eggs, it could be anywhere from 100 to 100 eggs. We know that only a few of those are going to survive, but we also know that female mosquitoes are fantastic predators of her species. Talk about the Ades mosquito. One of them here is Ades albopictus. These are black and white mosquitoes, and they will have a white stripe right down their thorax. They only bite mostly during the day. They prefer to breed in containers, and that's why they're always telling you to go out in your yard and empty out any standing water. The thing with the Ades albopictus is, again a typo, I apologize for that, is it's not native to the United States, but it's come in and it's competed well with our native species of Ades, and that would be Ades aegypti. Again, a black and white mosquito, but instead of having a very noticeable white bar on its thorax, it has a crossbar here. I got the spelling right on this one. Able to transmit yellow fever, chikungunya, and dengue. And when Dr. Bocchini and I were doing the radio show, we both agreed that even though chikungunya virus hasn't established a permanent reservoir here in the United States, it's only a matter of time. It's coming because we have mosquitoes here that we know are capable of transmitting the virus. The other genus, the Anopheles mosquitoes, these are the ones that are associated with malaria, West Nile virus, and some dog heartworms. They're not black and white. They're not as bold as the Ades mosquitoes. These are the Anopheles. But they will have 4 spots on each wing. Over here, you can't see it very well, but here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the other thing about mosquito that you can tell from other flies. Mosquitoes only have 2 pairs of wings. Most insects that are non-flies have 4 pairs of wings. Is that they have scales on their wings, almost like the scales of a butterfly, but of course not as prominent. So that's the Anopheles mosquito, large brown, 4 spots on the wings. Not that many of us take time to look to see what kind of mosquito it is before we slap it, but that's what we do. Me, I'll slap it and then I'll look at it. And my husband thinks I'm crazy. That's okay. The Culex mosquitoes are Culex mosquitoes because they're not Ades and they're not Anopheles. They're not the big black and white with striped mosquitoes. They're not the brown ones with the 4-spotted wings. So Culex or Culex mosquitoes basically by default, okay? This is the southern house mosquito. They're kind of yellowish, tannish in color. They'll feed from dusk to dawn. And the Culex mosquito are normally the ones that are associated with most forms of encephalitis. I hold the Speairs Professorship of Field Biology at LSUS, and
Dick was a friend of mine, and he actually died of complications from West Nile virus, unfortunately. And I remember asking him, Dick, do you remember the mosquito that bit you? He said, yeah, it was a yellow mosquito. And so, obviously, it was probably either a Culex mosquito of some sort, which made exactly perfect sense. There are some other little anecdotal ways that you can distinguish between mosquitoes, especially the larvae. Anopheles are unique in the fact that they will lay their eggs in rafts that float on the water. The immatures of mosquitoes are called wigglers. And if you ever see a container that has mosquitoes, watch them for a while before you destroy them. Because the little wigglers, the larvae, they'll go down to the bottom and then they'll swim back up, and then they have a breathing tube, an air tube, that they will take that air from. The Anopheles will lay horizontal, the Ades and the Culex will be vertical. The other thing about Anopheles is when the adults do feed, they stand on their head. They'll angle their body from anywhere from a 45-degree angle or higher, insert the mouth parts, and then begin to feed. Again, not that so many people will notice that, but you know, and even when they're resting on a wall, they'll have this angle. Whereas the adult of the other two, if you want to look at it closely, it'll deal with these palp structures on their mouth parts. The pupae of mosquitoes are unique in the fact they're the only few insects that have active pupae. Most of the time, the pupae are just dormant. They're just metamorphizing from the immature to the adult stage. But these are actually active, and they're called tumblers because they'll tumble down to the water, bottom of the water, and then they'll tumble back up instead of doing this little motion here. And that way you know that you're dealing with mosquitoes. One of the things that I think Dr. McKinney and I really hit on when we were doing the show is that you have to understand the life cycle interactions between the vector and the pathogen. A lot of people don't understand the physiology of mosquitoes or the physiology of the ticks and mosquitoes. When a mosquito is taking a blood meal, like I said, she's sucking in the blood, she's squirting out her saliva. If the saliva contains a pathogen, well, she's now inoculated that organism that she's feeding on. But when she is feeding on an organism that already is a reservoir for the pathogen, that pathogen has to come in through the blood. That pathogen enters into the gut of the mosquito. That pathogen then has to exit the gut and go into what we call the hemolymph. Insects don't have a closed circulatory system. They have an open circulatory system, which basically means their blood just kind of sloshes around. Theoretically, you can cut off the head of a mosquito and pour the blood out, like a cup of coffee. I've tried that. and I used to work in research laboratories where I had to take actually blood samples, but it's just an open circulatory system. It just kind of sloshes around. So the pathogen has to find its way from this sloshing hemolymph up into the female salivary glands. Then the pathogen has to gain access into the salivary glands and then be in position to be injected into the next biting victim. And that's yet another thing about the mosquito. A mosquito will take a component of blood meal, and she will not feed again until she lays her clutch of eggs. And so it would be very unusual for a female to feed on individual A, pick up a pathogen, and then she is not going to immediately go over to an individual B and inject that pathogen. That's not the way they do. And so it is a very complicated life cycle. Then you have to look at the life cycle of the pathogen. If it's a bacteria, it's pretty simple. They'll just go through, their binary fission to reproduce. If it's something like a protozoan, Panosoma, Plasmodia, they have to go through their asexual life cycle, they have to go through their sexual life cycle. If it's a virus, they have to be able to replicate within the cells.
of the insect. And they have done extensive research on trying to see if the HIV virus can replicate in insect cells, and it cannot. Perhaps someday it may change, but at this point it cannot. And so you really have to understand this interaction between pathogen, vector, pathogen. Is the vector going to be a permanent reservoir or a temporary reservoir? So if you get into this research, you have to be able to understand this component. This, I think, is one of the things that we really, hit home on that day, and a lot of people don't understand that. And even within the physiology of the insect, the pH is going to be different, the microenvironment is going to be different, different temperatures, very complicated. Now, as far as flies are concerned, before I move on to mosquitoes, there are some incidental occurrence of infectious diseases. Deer flies can transmit tularemia. Mechanical transmission actually occurs with Ades. They're attracted to the tears of the tear duct, and they can mechanically pick up pink eye pathogen and mechanically transmit it, and it doesn't have to go through the entire physiology aspect of it. So let's go to ticks. Ticks aren't insects. They're very closely related more to spiders because they have 8 legs instead of the simple 6 legs. The main pathogens, Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, ehrlichiosis. A female tick can lay up to 2,000 to 18,000 eggs in her lifetime. That just boggles the mind. And the thing about ticks is, and we were just talking about this, is that they're not host specific. You can have deer ticks on dogs, you can have dog ticks on cats, you can have cat ticks on humans. They're very non-host specific. Now let's look at the morphology, if you will, of ticks. Here you have female. This is the black-legged tick. This is one that you're normally going to be looking at for West Nile. This is the lone star tick, very prominent in these parts. Here you have the deer tick. The key thing about ticks is the difference in the morphology between the males and the females. Ticks will have this dorsal shield called a scutellum. On the female, this scutellum does not cover the entire abdomen. Ticks don't come in the head, thorax, and abdomen like insects do. They have a cephalothorax and then an abdomen. The males are somewhat smaller, and with the black-legged tick, the Ades, you can't see it, but here, this dot on the lone star tick is at the base of its shield. So all of this part of her abdomen is not covered in the shield. Where on the male, the shield covers the entire dorsal aspect of the abdomen. Again, with the dog tick, here's the shield of the female. The shield of the male covers the entire abdomen. And then you have the immatures. The other interesting thing about ticks is what we call the seed ticks. Seed ticks only have 6 legs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then as they molt and they mature, then they'll develop into an 8-legged organism. Now, ticks like to feed on blood, and they have a very specialized mouthparts called hypostome. Here you have the ventral portion of a tick, leg, palate, those are just the mouthparts. And then you have, well, they're part of the mouthparts, but they're basically more for sensory. And then you have the center hypostome. And it's the center hypostome that the tick will actually insert into the tissue to take a blood meal. If you look up close to the hypostome, and this is a scanning electron micrograph, none of these are my pictures. I stole them all, but I referenced them. So I'm not plagiarizing, I'm legal, so that's okay. If you look at the hypostome in more detail, they have these recurved spines. And so when that hypostome is injected into that tissue and you try to pull it out, it's going to have some resistance because of those back recurved spines. That's why a tick is so hard to pull out, and that's why they say get as close to the mouth parts as you can to try to pull out that hypostome. The mistake a lot of people make is that they grab the body and they try to pull it out. Well, that's just like, just grabbing the body, and when you squeeze it, it's just going to inject all of those bodily fluids right into the tissue. So you have to get as close down to the mouth parts as possible. Now, one of the reasons, let's go back and look, that this scutellum doesn't cover the entire back of the female is because she has to become what we call engorged. She needs a lot of blood because she needs a lot of protein to produce a component of eggs. So, here you have a black-legged tick, female, unfed. Here you have the engorged female. And if you look at the head and the legs, they're about the same size. And I looked at this picture, and I thought, that really, what I need is a better before and after picture. So I went online and I was looking for before and after, and I found a classic one. Here we have before and after. An unfed dog tick on top of a day 8 dog tick. Look at this size, head, same size, leg, leg. But here you have this entire engorged body. And this engorged body contains all of that. Isn't that amazing? This engorged body has all of this blood in there, and the next thing you know, all of this blood is now transformed into eggs. And I told you that they can lay an enormous amount of eggs, and that's all the female is doing, is just producing copious amounts of eggs, okay? It's amazing. This is from the Department of Entomology down up in Nebraska. They have a fantastic department up there. And the other thing that I talked about when I was with Dr. Bikini is how do ticks find their host? Well, there's this process that's called questing. A tick, even though they have eyes, what they rely on are sensory mechanisms. A tick will crawl up on a blade of grass, up on a piece of shrubbery, and most of the time, perfect tick habitat is going to be high grass areas, low shrubs, instead of just barren forest. It's going to be on the edge of ecotones, where you have like a forest and a meadow. They're going to be at that edge. And the tick will crawl up on a blade of grass, hang on by their hind legs, and with their front legs, they'll just dangle them up in the air. And what's going on here is they actually have on their front legs a CO2 sensor. It's called a Haller's organ. And here you can see that little Haller's organ there. It can pick up changes in CO2. It can pick up changes in temperature. And then the tick is also monitoring for movement. And so here the tick is questing and higher CO2 levels, higher temperature levels. When you walk by, they just grab on, and now they're attached to you. They'll crawl up, normally, oftentimes against the back hairline, and they'll start feeding. So, I used to volunteer at the tick lab when I was doing my master's degree at Texas A&M, and they would have ticks in these plexiglass containers, and they would be very quiet. They would just be in there. And I can't leave things left alone. I would open up the plexiglass container, and I would exhale in there, and all that CO2 rushed, and they're like, oh my God. Speaking of meals, and then I just close the lid and walk away and finally just, let it on here. But fascinating little organisms are the ticks. Then you have the fleas. Fleas are fascinating as well because they're so well designed for what they do. Fleas are flattened laterally instead of most things being flattened dorsoventrally. And fleas are secondarily wingless, which means through evolutionary time, fleas at one time had wings. But wings are not a good thing for fleas because if a flea is on a host and a gust of wind comes along, then those wings kind of act like sails and they can be blown off their host. And so fleas are secondarily wingless. The mouth parts of fleas are what we call raspy, sucking. Fleas don't have the same type of mouth parts that mosquitoes have. They are what we call pool of blood feeders, But I'll get to that in a minute. If you look at a flea dorsally, you can see it's flattened side to side. And isn't that a great body plan to have if you have to run through hairs, you know? And so it's able to go through its environment. Fleas are relatively small, especially compared to mosquitoes, and basically compared to ticks as well. And they're their exoskeleton is very, very tough. You know, with a mosquito, you catch a mosquito and it's just a soft-bodied insect. But if you try to kill a flea, you basically have to get it between two hard substances. I actually found, I don't know how, but I found a flea on myself last weekend, and it's because I was around some other people's pets. And I basically had to put it down on my desk and take my fingernail and kind of just finally smash it, you know. And luckily there wasn't any blood in there. You know, it was just flea stuff. And so every time you kill a flea, the last thing you want to see is a blood spot, because that means it's been feeding. But here we go. Pulled blood feeders. They will take, and their mouth parts kind of work like a can opener, like you would open up a can of evaporated milk, you know, with the little pointed structure. And they'll rock their body in there, they'll create a wound on the skin, and then they'll feed on the pool of blood. They will not insert mouth parts like mosquitoes. They will not insert mouth parts like ticks will. They'll just lap up the blood as it comes to the surface. And of course we know fleas are agents of the plague, and you guys know better, but I have to tell my students, the plague just didn't end during the Renaissance. You know, the plague is still out there. And so they can also transmit dog tapeworm, not that that's important in infectious diseases, but it's still, to me, there's actually two ways that you can get tapeworm, the dog tapeworm, from around fleas and dogs. And of course, typhus. And fleas are not host specific either. Cat fleas will feed on dogs, dog fleas will feed on cats. There's actually a human flea, Felis irritans, that will feed on dogs or cats or humans. But how do fleas, if they're not going to insert their mouth parts, how do they actually transmit the, you know, the bacteria? If we're talking about the plague, Yersinia pestis or something like that. Well, there's two ways. One, inoculation by regurgitation. Oftentimes, especially if it's a bacterial infection, the bacteria will grow up in such large numbers that it will actually cause an intestinal blockage. So as the flea feeds, the flea will basically throw up and regurgitate part of that bacteria and inoculate the wound. If there's no intestinal blockage, the other weird behavior thing about fleas is that when fleas feed, you've got to be careful because that's kind of hard to say, the feeding of fleas, when a flea feeds, it also turns on the stimulus to poop. And so the fleas are feeding at one end and defecating at the other end. And the bacteria is going to be in the gut of the flea, and so it's going to come out with the feces, insect feces. I always challenge my students, they never do it though. Just think of all the words we have in the English language for crap. You know, it's amazing. And we have a specialized name for insect feces. It's called frass. And where's Damien? Damien, you had to measure the frass of the caterpillars when you were doing your work with Dr. Thompson at LSUS. And so that's
That explains a lot.
yeah. Sorry, Damien. So, you know, they put their frass out on the skin. I used to have a softball team called the Frass Kickers. Nobody knew what it was but us. And after the flea feeds, of course, that's going to cause some irritation. And you go to scratch yourself, and you basically self-inoculate. You're rubbing the flea feces into the feeding wound. And so, and if you look back, you also have to realize that the biology, the life cycle of the flea, I showed you at the very beginning, the immatures are grub-like. And so if you're going to have to treat for fleas, you have to treat for the immatures, and you have to treat for the fleas. And one of the best flea treatments is an insect growth relator that basically shuts down the reproduction in the adult, and it prevents the immatures from ever molting into an adult. It's an IGR, an insect growth regulator. And then that brings us to lice. We normally don't worry about lice today, not in the United States, but lice are extremely unique in their biology. They are gradual metamorphosis. Here you have the egg, and lice will glue their eggs to the shaft of hairs. And the special name that we give for lice eggs are called nits. And this is where we get the term nitpicking, because if somebody has the tenacity to sit there and look at every hair shaft and pick all the nits off of the hair, then they're nitpickers. And then the lice will gradually develop. This is the life cycle of Pediculus humanus. Now, here's the thing about lice. They have to take a blood meal at every molt, and so they're very, very, very active feeders. The other thing about lice, compared to ticks, compared to mosquitoes, compared to fleas, is they are extremely host specific. And that's one reason there's such a proliferation of lice. You got your cow lice, your horse lice, your hog lice, your human lice, and even within a human, we have two subspecies and two different main species with lice. The lice that we have on humans are blood-sucking lice, but again, they don't really have the mouth parts to actually insert it to the tissue. They're creating wounds, and that will bring the blood up to the lice. With human lice, we have Pediculus humanus capitis versus Pediculus humanus humanus. Pediculus humanus capitis are the head lice that kids bring home from school all the time. And then we have Pediculus humanus humanus, which is the body lice. And human body lice isn't very common in our area in the United States. It's normally associated with closed populations that don't have good hygiene. And Pediculus humanus and its ability to transmit epidemic typhus was a huge problem during World War I, because you had troops down in the trenches. They didn't have good hygiene available to them, close contact with each other. And there is actually a huge difference between these. Not only is one on the head and the other on the body, but the body lice will come onto the body and feed. The head lice will stay on the body and feed, but the body lice, once they feed, they'll actually enter into the clothing. They won't stay on the body. And oftentimes in heavy infestations, another common name for human body lice are seam squirrels, because they've got like to get that tight seam where the fabric is sewn together. And so then, of course, you have the Rhapsus pubis, which is completely different within itself. Here you have a head and body lice, and notice how the ends of the tarsal segments are very, very well suited for grasping onto hairs. They have this claw-like mechanism to grasp onto hairs. You compare the head and body louse to the Therus pubis louse, the pubic lice, and again, you can see why they call them crabs. They truncated abdomen, extended arms, but they have these little pinchers, these little graspy things that they can hold on to. That's the big four. That's the mosquitoes, fleas, ticks, lice. But I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to the Ridgevide family of true bugs. One of the ones that is notorious is the kissing bug. Sometimes these are called cone-nosed bugs, because here you have the eyes, the 1, 2, 3 legs, the antenna, you have the eyes, and it has this extended mouth part that sometimes people will call the cone. And these bugs are able to transmit Chagas disease. And most people just associate Chagas disease with Central South America. But I think, could be wrong, but I think that especially as things change, we're going to see Chagas disease coming further and further north. If there's already documented cases in South Texas, there have been some cases in South Louisiana, but I don't know if that's transient, like chikungunya virus right now. Everybody that's been diagnosed has been down in the Caribbean somewhere. But I really think Chagas disease might be forthcoming. What do you think, Dr. McKinney?
I think that's true, and actually, that we just came back from infectious disease meeting, and there's a study going on in Fort Hood where they're looking at these bugs, and when they're catching these bugs, 25% of them have human blood, so that they are feeding on people, and so the potential for transmission is there.
It's there.
It's there.
And sometimes these are called kissing bugs because they'll come out at night and they like to feed around the face, and they do have piercing, sucking mouth parts, very, very similar to mosquitoes. And the mouth part is called a rostrum or a beak, and at rest it's like this, and then when they go to feed, then they stick it into the tissue. Hollywood can't come up with stuff better than this. You know, this is fantastic the way these things are manufactured. And I also wanted to just say a little bit today about bed bugs. Bed bug right now is almost at the epidemic level. I don't go into any hotel room anymore. I don't even take my luggage in there until I go in there and inspect for bed bugs. Lift up the mattress. They might be around the seams of the mattress. They may be on headboards. But the weird thing about bed bugs is they are not known to transmit any disease. But I don't know, maybe that's coming too. But they have the same piercing, sucking mouth parts as the Regibae family of bugs, the cone nose or the kissing bugs do. And I tell my students all the time, I say, I'd rather be bit by a bed bug than by a mosquito, because they're not known to transmit any disease. And although I'm very hypersensitive to mosquito bites, and I think looking back, I might have gone more into mosquito biology, but they are what they are. And one of the other things that I like to talk to people about is repellents. If you're going to be in an environment where you know you're going to be exposed to mosquitoes, fleas, ticks, black flies, you don't have much of a problem with black flies in the southern part of the United States, but it's tremendously bad if you go further north, especially into the Great Lakes areas. The CDC recommends only 2 repellents, and that is the repellent diethylamide, which is DEET. You can get DEET at different concentrations. It doesn't mean that the 10% concentration is a less repellent than a 30% concentration. The 30% concentration will just last 3 times as longer as the DEET concentration. And you also have the picardium, which is actually a black pepper plant. That's one of the things that I do my research with, are plant-produced oleochemicals that may have some insecticidal activity. And that was the research project I was working with Damien. Certain alkaloids will have that effect. And then, although it's not listed here, one of the things that Dr. McKinney was talking to the audience about was pyrethrins. Pyrethrins don't really act as a repellent, but as a deterrent. Once the insects are on you, if you have your clothing treated with pyrethrin, then that's actually an insecticide that will deter them to continue feeding. And then a lot of people like the geranol or other plant oils, your citronella, your eucalyptus oils, but many of the other things that people try to sell as insect repellents are not insect repellents at all. All they're doing is that they're covering up your natural smell. The mosquitoes, as I said, the ticks with their little haulers, organs, they're going to be attracted to CO2. They're going to be attracted to certain other body volatiles that are coming off your skin. They're going to be attracted to increases in temperature. And one of the things that I don't have a slide for here is if you ever want to monitor a tick population in an area, what's very common is for people to take a piece of white cloth and just drag it along, because you're exhaling CO2 and these ticks are going to be leaving the plants and they'll be attracted to the white cloth, and you can see them on the white cloth. If you really want to mess with their minds, not that they have minds, is put a little bit of dry ice
and drag that dry ice along. And that dry ice is going to be, emitting CO2, and that's actually kind of cool because then they attach themselves to the dry ice, and when instant death, it freezes them. So that's a little bit about what I know about insects and transmittance of insect diseases. And I have to share with you by one of my favorite Gary Larson Far Side cartoons. It says, "Pull out, Betty, pull out, you hit an artery." And so, again, I'd like to thank Bikini and Jessica for inviting me to come today. And I think I'm right on time. It's 8:45, and so I have time for a little bit of questions if you happen to have any.
That's great. So we're open for questions. So can you tell us a little bit about, go ahead, Steve.
There's one question. Still looking for a blister bug.
Blister bugs.
Tell us about a blister bug. Do we have blister bugs, or is that just...
They're blister beetles. Blister beetles are beetles that are in the family Cantharidae, and they produce the chemical Cantharidae, which is act as a dermal irritant. But blister bugs, they really, you have to really handle and really even crush the blister beetles on your skin to get that cantharidin out of them. The worst thing about blister beetles is that they are plant feeders, and they like to feed a lot on hay and alfalfa. And if you have a certain titer of blister beetles in your hay, it could be actually lethal to livestock, especially horses. But the thing that I don't like is there's a lot of stink bugs and stink bug families that will emit not a blister-containing compound, but just foul smelling, and it will last on your hands. You can't wash it off; it just has to be some oil. So blister beetles are cool. They have a very interesting morphology. A beetle is a beetle. If you see one that has the front wings that lie in a straight line down their back, and blister beetles at the tail end of their forewings will have a curve. It'll be split. It's almost like they're wearing tails, as in a tuxedo with tails. And so they're not. I don't worry about blister beetles. They're fine. The weird thing about blister beetles, though, is the most famous blister beetle in all time is called the Spanish bug, or Spanish fly, which is not a fly at all. It's actually not Spanish. But we all know that this would be an aphrodisiac, but it's really not. Not that I know it's very
I've got a question about these businesses that have the mosquito control stuff that spray. I guess they come in and, I don't know, follow around the house.
They do misting nets.
Misting and stuff. I mean, how does that work? How does that keep mosquitoes from adjacent yards and things?
What they're doing is they're laying down a light layer of pyrethroids. And pyrethroids, there's three different classifications of insecticides, and pyrethroids are synthetic pyrethroids. Anytime you see an insecticide with the suffix THRIN, pyrethrin is a pyrethrin, and a pyrethrin basically is a neurotoxin, but it affects their nervous system in the fact that it's a paralyzer. And so if they're just basically maintaining a minimal, what we call it, minimal inhibitory concentration in your yard. So it works, it's fine, but I think a lot of it is, I would just really go out there, if I'm gonna have a party, just spray the things down with a mild pyrethrin and keep the rest of the money in my pocket. But I hope nobody here has their own company. That's my thing, my opinion.
So when you do that, you spray a long-term anti-bug, that also changes the ecology. Do we know anything about what the long-term effects of that are?
Well, we know that beneficial insects and spiders are much more susceptible to these pyrethroids than the bad guys are. So you're taking away the beneficial insects. You're basically killing everything, and that's we had insecticides that could target, that had target specificity only to mosquitoes and the bad guys. Well, let me be your business partner, because we can, that would be, we don't have the perfect insecticide yet, we don't have it.
And the genetically altered mosquitoes that have been used
Yeah.
in the Bahamas and things, how's that working out? So
What he's referring to is that whole pathogen vector life cycle thing that I was talking about earlier. They're now going in and they're doing some genetically engineering to the mosquitoes so that they are no longer a suitable temporary host for the vector. And they are genetically engineering mosquitoes. And I think they're having some success, but the problem, if you're going to put a genetically engineered organism like that out into the environment, then you have to make sure that their reproductive success is equal to a non-genetically engineered mosquito's reproductive success. And there was a program back in the 60s, it was called the Screwworm Eradication Program in South Texas, where they were radiating male flies. And the male flies had as equal access to the females as the non-radiating flies. And once the female mated, then she wouldn't mate again. And if she mated with a bad male, then that basically would stop that reproduction. It was more like a male birth control.
program,
Yeah, it was called the male sterilization program. And so I think there's a lot. I'm excited.
So that seems, that's how mosquitoes work similarly, right? The male component, I think they're putting sterilized males that are not able to actually reproduce. So they only have one life cycle
Yeah,
that they can help complete.
And that's the other thing about mosquitoes. Mosquitoes, well, I think I said this earlier, will not bite again until she uses that component of protein to produce a bunch of eggs. And so it kind of squelches things down a little bit that way as well. Any other questions? But there's a lot of great stuff that's going on with genetically engineering stuff. I'm excited about it.
So can I ask that the American Academy of Pediatric recommends to take the kid out? Carrot squeezes as close to the mouthparts as possible and then gentle traction. That's what you would.
Absolutely, yeah. Because the last thing you want to do is piss off the tip, and so it's stressed, and so it's going to perhaps inject more saliva into the feeding wound. So gentle extraction. Do not use your fingers. Get as close down to the tissue as you possibly, the flesh, as you possibly can to pull that hydrostome out.
So you have a patient that's from 0 to 6, and then that's what you want to do.
There's been these things like, light a match and put it on there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, normally the mouth parts will come out. It's not like a beast thing where the parts are left back in. The mouth parts come out unless you use such force with the tweezers that you actually clean it off. It's really big device. Yes?
Are the kissing bugs ever found like attached to each other?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very promiscuous that way. Same like ladybugs. Ladybugs are very, there's nothing ladylike about it. I know. Thank you for your time.